I think the bootcamp route was a good fit for me because back when I had a little bit of trouble self-starting. And that's the advantage of the bootcamp over the traditional cert route is like, if you're not a self-starter, the immersion with the bootcamp is kind of guaranteed if you're willing to follow the track. Whereas with a certification, it's like, that's on you.
Welcome to CyberSecurity Heroes, an IRONSCALES podcast about you, the heroes of cybersecurity. You're about to hear and learn practical and experiential knowledge in our conversations with security leaders and practitioners and other influential InfoSec stars, so we can become more cyber resilient and safer together. CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IRONSCALES, the most powerfully simple email security platform. And I'm your host, Brendan Rudd. And now, let's get into the show. Hey Matticus, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to help us here and provide some solutions to the cyber skills shortage debate. So before we begin, I would love to hear a little bit about you and what you're working on these days.
Yeah, so my name is Matticus Hunt. I'm kind of a recent entry into the cybersecurity space. I've been working for Muskogee Nation Casinos in Oklahoma for about 6 months now, and we're getting along just fine. This is my first cyber role. So before this, I was actually in an unrelated field. And also prior to this, I've been teaching a cybersecurity boot camp, and I'm excited to kind of talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I'm fairly new in the cybersecurity space, and I'm loving it so far. And I'm filling in that skill shortage or, whatever it is we got going on.
For the listeners, this is a series that we want to work on and bring on all sides to bring solutions, hiring managers, HR, to try and at least bring solutions to the problem. So I hope this episode and the future episodes will provide some value as we try to fill those seats. So having said that, when did you decide to get into cybersecurity?
So in about the middle of 2019, my friend and I were discussing what we were going to do with our careers, really, because we were kind of both doing, for lack of a better phrase, not much. And we wanted to try and find a direction. And he brought up cybersecurity, which, per his reasoning, had strong job growth and good job safety and all of these kind of traditional elements that you would look for in any career. But it just kind of coincided with some general interests that I had. And that conversation alone was enough for me to, start looking into it, start researching it, maybe made a few Google searches, and one thing led to another. Eventually my targeted ads on Facebook are trying to sell me cybersecurity programs. And that's how I ended up getting into an educational program, the boot camp I was mentioning earlier.
And did you have any previous skills going into this related to the industry?
Yeah, so in kind of a minimal way, yes. I've always been a computer hobbyist. So things like building computers physically and, provisioning software and troubleshooting networking issues. This is all stuff I had done in my general life. I had a little bit of command line experience, and, one time when I was 14, I played with the low orbit ion cannon. That was a long time ago. But as far as professional skills, I don't have a degree in information technology. The path didn't seem super obvious at first. So I decided to go the route of, taking schooling.
So you got into cyber after you had studied non-related subjects, is that correct?
Yeah. So when I was in college, which was, I would say about 3 years ago, I was actually studying business, and it was totally unrelated and not that interesting, in my opinion.
So how did you land up getting into the boot camp, and did you know if that would be the right path for you?
So the boot camp that I took was through the University of Kansas. So it was called the University of Kansas CyberSecurity Bootcamp. And they had, their whole pitch was kind of like, hey, you can come take the first week, and if you don't like it, you can drop it, no charges, whatever. So there was kind of like a free trial element to it that gave, the sensation of some kind of safety. But ultimately, I just kind of saw that ad, and I wasn't doing much, and I took a leap of faith, so to speak.
And what made you think that the investment would pay off versus maybe going the more traditional route of certs?
So at this time, I didn't really have the knowledge of certifications and how valuable they are in our industry. And if I could do everything again, I might go that route. Although I think the bootcamp route was a good fit for me, because back when I had a little bit of trouble self-starting. And that's the advantage of the bootcamp over the traditional cert route, is like, if you're not a self-starter, the immersion with the bootcamp is kind of guaranteed if you're willing to follow the track. Whereas with a certification, it's like, that's on you.
And have you taken any certs since completing your boot camp and starting your new role?
So yeah, I'm in the pen testing with Cali course content right now. I have lab time, and I have, and just quick overview for anyone who doesn't know what that is. Pen testing with Cali is the training portion of the Offensive Security Certified Professional certification. And it's, they give you an X amount of pages PDF. They give you access to an internal lab, and they say, go break it. And that's what I'm doing right now, but I haven't taken the test yet.
Gotcha. And in terms of the boot camp, what did you learn? What does it cover for any of those considering?
So what the boot camp covers is kind of, it's like a mile wide and an inch deep. We go from like basic TCP/IP networking concepts all the way down to network forensics and penetration testing. So I've got a couple notes here on this. Some of the main things we cover, like the CIA triad, and we try and relate things back to that concept. We cover the OSI model, of course, malware analysis, penetration testing, SIEMs, cryptography, basic Linux administration, basic Windows administration, Burp Suite, MSF console. I mean, we cover those in the pen testing unit, but they're touched on.
Would you say all boot camps have the same curriculum, or do you have to do your research? Are all boot camps equal in your opinion?
So all of the trilogy/2U boot camps will have a version of the content that I learned. And as far as I know, they're the most prolific company in creating these boot camps. But I would not be surprised if there are others. And, per usual, definitely do your own research. Know what you're getting yourself into. I want to throw in here also, if you are a listener considering going the boot camp route, do go in and really meet your professor and meet your TAs and ask every question you have in that first week, in that drop period, because the reality is you either get lucky with your instructional staff or you don't. I got lucky with my instructional staff, and that's what it was. It was luck. I'm fortunate for that, but I don't want to sit here and pretend that everyone's going to have that same experience.
In terms of questions to ask, what advice can you give to folks wanting to take a boot camp, and what questions in hindsight would you have asked?
In regards to that, I would speak to it kind of like this. The cost of the boot camp that I took was about $12,000. But the person teaching the boot camp that I took would have been about a $350 to $500 an hour consultant, right? So if you were hiring him on a consultancy basis, you'd have to pay around $300 to $500 an hour. So to have that much time with someone for that little amount of money over the course of things, literally ask every question. Like when it comes down to it, no question that you have as a beginner is a bad question. Like, why does this do this? Or how does this go that way? Like, it can be as general or as specific as you want it to be. Like, just keep in mind the value that you're getting out of this is a mixture of the effort that you're putting into it and, you know, the answers to your questions that you can't just get for free on Google or whatever. So really just ask every question. That's my advice.
And you mentioned the cost of the boot camp. So how many months was the boot camp for 12,000?
So the boot camp was 6 months, and we do 12 hours a week of course content. So it's quite a bit of time that you end up spending with the class and the instructor and the TAs. I ended up coming away with a lot of what are now going to be lifelong friends from mine, and my instructor shared a lot of his passion for cybersecurity with me, and it was a very good experience for me. And based on my experience, I would recommend it. But there is this just kind of reality that I was very lucky with who I got as an instructor, and your mileage may vary.
Doing a boot camp versus doing certs, what other than what you mentioned, now that you've done both, what else would you say are the advantages and disadvantages of either of those options?
An advantage to taking a boot camp is that you get to build your network right then and there. The people you're taking the course with, the people teaching the course, and the people that you interact with as just part of the ecosystem of those boot camps, there's a real networking element to it, and that is for sure advantageous. As far as the certs are concerned, the network that you can build going for a cert is probably even more significant than the network that I had just mentioned, but it requires more and more effort. So I really do think the difference between these two paths is if you are motivated and you have the time already and you don't need to make that capital with anyone, like if you say to your wife or your kid or your friends or whatever, whoever is vying for your time that, hey, I need 6 months to study this thing, right? If they'll believe you and you can actually get that started on your own, certification's the way to go. But you're going to have to segment yourself and get that time. That is so hard. The immersion is so important. And if you don't have that, it becomes infinitely harder to succeed. But, you know, when you're doing a class or a boot camp, that capital is kind of given to you for free. Generally, you're going to be physically going somewhere, although they host them all online right now. I'm not sure when they're planning on getting them back to in person. But, you know, your wife, your kid, your friends, they're just going to think, oh, he's in school. Like this is just one of those human elements. Like people will trust you to study and succeed on your own. And we give people around us a lot of power. So you kind of get that benefit of this is a university sanctioned thing if you're going the boot camp route.
CyberSecurity Heroes is brought to you by IRONSCALES, an AI-powered, self-learning email security platform that helps security professionals proactively prevent, detect, and remediate phishing attacks in a matter of seconds, not hours or days. And we have an exclusive offer for our podcast listeners. Discover dormant phishing threats in your organization's mailboxes. Get a free 90-day scan back with a detailed report. Integrate in seconds with 2 clicks via API to Microsoft Office 365 and see what your current email security is missing. Go to ironscales.com/free scan to learn more.
And of course, if you can afford, it's not cheap compared to certifications.
Nope, that's true.
And fast forwarding to your job search, can you walk us through your process and experience? Any mistakes or learnings you did along the way that you can share?
Yeah, I made 2 major, quote unquote, right, mistakes during the job search. The first one was I didn't apply to enough jobs initially. And that just was dragging out the time that it took me to actually find that entry-level position. And it's worth mentioning, finding your first position in cybersecurity is hard. You know, I considered at various times going for like a tier 1 tech support position or, this open position or that open position just to do something, right? Just to get my foot in the door. I had the good fortune of being able to be a TA for the same bootcamp that I took. And that was enough of a foot in the door that I was able to kind of negotiate a cybersecurity cybersecurity position kind of right out of the gate. But that's not always the path that you take. What I've heard again and again, and what I find to be the most true thing is, apply to every job, and network with the people who you talk to, right? This was the other mistake I made is like, I would have a conversation with somebody, I would get to the first interviewing stage and then I would just drop that connection. I would no longer speak to that person. I think it's really important, particularly in cybersecurity, to understand who you're talking to and to build your network everywhere you can, because it's a very small industry. Eventually that person who you talk to who was not a gainful conversation at the time will come back around and you will have that gainful conversation. And it really is only a matter of time.
What do you think helped you get your interview?
In my case, getting my interview, I really think it happened because I applied to a very low visibility job posting. So when I applied to Muskogee Nation Casinos, I actually found the job posting because I was looking for something completely unrelated. I am Muskogee, so I was trying to get like a tribal citizenship card so that I could get vaccinated. And in the process of, Google searches and whatever, that's how I found this job posting, but they weren't promoting it on LinkedIn, and there were various other things that they weren't doing. So I think their pool of candidates for this position was fairly small, and that made me a particularly good candidate comparatively.
And in terms of your actual interview, can you speak a little bit to that? How was that experience? What can you share from that?
Yeah, so when you're interviewing with somebody, you have to be able to stand by everything that you say, right? So it's important to pause and consider your words. It's important to not talk too much. It's important to not speak to what you're not able to speak to. I like to play a little game with myself when I'm in an interview where I consider it like a social engineering operation. So I like to consider what people may want or not want to hear from me, how they may or may not react to certain things I say. That said, it's important to stay honest, and it's important to know that your goal is to work with these people, right? But like things like speaking in the positive future tense, like saying, like when I'm doing this or in this role, I will, things like this, planting the seed in your interviewer's head that, when he is or when they are doing the job, you start to create a reality where you're doing the job, and you make that real not only for yourself, but by speaking it to the people that you'll be working with, you make it real for them too. Now, whether or not that's going to work is going to depend on the team, your qualifications, what they're looking for, and all these other factors. But I think it's really important not to shoot yourself in the foot. And when they ask you, what's the worst thing about you, or what's your problem, or this or that or the other thing, to not just spin it, but do not eat yourself alive. Like, that is not the place. There's a time and a place to be critical of yourself, and it's not in a job interview.
What would you say was an interesting observation during your interview that could help others?
That's another good question. In my interview specifically, I had very little real world experience when it came to like the operation of a SIEM, which is basically just a piece of software that aggregates logs and lets you look at the output of all of those logs and traffic and everything. It's like your first place that you look as a security analyst, at least in my position. But I went to one security conference and I entered one capture the flag. It's called OpenSOC CTF. I recommend anyone listening check it out, because I was able to lean on that experience in the interview, and I was able to talk about a certain tag system that exists in Graylog, even though I had never, been in an enterprise where I'd used it, I'd still used it to capture the flag. And I was able to speak to that because it's something I had done. And I really think that speaking to that experience is what got me the job.
Were there any other themes in your interview that were coming up? Anything you can put your finger on?
In my case, we run a lot of systems that are not the most cutting edge. Not to say they're unusable, dated, whatever, but we're not a cloud shop, for example. And because of that, they did a lot of, how do I say, they were testing me to see what my appetite for working in some older systems was. And my appetite for that was pretty high at the time, and still is. But, don't be surprised when you're in your interview and they start talking to you about the specific things that you'll be doing, That's something that I kind of didn't realize until I had that experience, I guess, is at the end of the day, you will be doing specific things in these specific systems. My education in this space was very general. So it's they'll target you where you need to utilize your skill set, or they should.
And what is your current role?
So my current title is CyberSecurity Analyst 1, and that's my title. As far as what I do, it's a lot of very team-oriented stuff. It's a lot of planning, logistics, governance, risk, and compliance, and just the enforcement of decisions made around risk. We also do, we wear a lot of hats where I work because it's a two-man security team, and that leaves very little time and very many tasks. But we make it work. We also do the dashboard work and, sit behind dashboards like any good security analyst should.
So you mentioned wearing a lot of hats, and that brings up the question of cyber burnout. I know you're still relatively new to your role in the company, but it sounds like you love what you're doing. But do you have any advice or any tips for folks like yourself just getting in and not burning themselves out?
Yeah, I think burnout is going to happen to anyone in cybersecurity. I've hit it a bit myself, but I'm planning a trip, just like anything else, we mitigate it, right? As far as burnout is concerned, it's hard to talk about it without comparing cybersecurity to other industries, but there is always a light at the end of the tunnel in cybersecurity, because there's always somebody who wants you more than whoever has you now, right? So I do love my current job. I'm learning a lot here, and it's been a great opportunity up to this point. There will come a point where I am no longer employed by my current employer, and I move on to a better opportunity for myself, for whatever reason I choose, right? Better pay, or something I'm more interested in, or a location I'd rather be. We have that kind of flexibility in cybersecurity, and that's one of the good reasons to get into it. Is just that everybody wants you, everybody needs you. That's the thing. When you're building this skill set, you'll come to realize with the small size of the industry, there's supply and demand, and there are economic forces at play, and you'll become aware of that, how valuable you are in this and that and the other thing. But the reality is everybody in the business world needs you and me. It is a crazy feeling. You do not feel undervalued in cybersecurity. Everyone will value what you have to say. And at least for me, it reinforces my ability to keep on learning and taking stuff seriously, because it's an important field.
And what do you love about your role specifically for others considering the security analyst path?
So what I love about my role now is that the business leans on me and counts on my good work for their continuing success and operation. I think for some people that could be a scary thing, right? To be truly relied on. But for me, it's very meaningful because that adds value to what I've done and what I've accomplished in the short time I've been in cyber, right? The fact that any company is willing to trust me enough to make me an important part of their process is it's flattering, but it's also it's teaching me how much value I can provide to a team, even without, years and years and years of experience, just because I'm taking things seriously, I'm considering things analytically, I'm not just saying whatever pops into my head and I'm not passing blame. And that makes me, someone worth relying on. So I love that about my job.
What 3 traits would you say from a personality and skill set are important for this type of work?
Communication's number 1. You need to be able and willing and happy to say things that will not make people happy and you won't have the opportunity to be like just a people pleaser, right? So you need to know how to structure the information that you're giving to people in a way that will not offend them, but will inform them. And this all comes back to communication. So I would say if there was one thing, it would be communication. Number 2 is self-investment. You need to take yourself seriously in cybersecurity. You need to understand that the things that you're dealing with are serious and kind of on the forefront of what everybody's going to end up thinking about. You might hear about things a week or 2 earlier than other people do, but it all makes the rounds. And if you're not taking yourself seriously, you can end up having a very negative impact, not just for your company, but for yourself too. I mean, I think in general, it's important to love yourself and care for yourself. But in cybersecurity, if you're not taking yourself seriously, somebody else might still take you seriously. And that's very dangerous, in my opinion. And if I had to throw a third one on there, besides communication and taking yourself seriously, I would say probably continuous learning, the ability to continuously learn and get new information and take value from it. If you don't have that, you can still work in cybersecurity, but it's very hard and you will be less effective than people who do have that, in my opinion. So having that real thirst for knowledge will serve you your whole life, right? But in cybersecurity, it'll really provide you the fuel that you need to keep on doing well.
In terms of your first, let's say 90 days, what advice would you give to people just got their first cyber role? How would you tell them to act and behave in the first 90 days?
I would say in your first 90 days, leverage your lack of tenure to figure out for each leader what their long-term goals are for the business. Once you're steeped in meetings and daily work and this and that, it becomes very difficult to get an honest read of what people's goals are. And the goals of the business are really what we fight to protect, at least on the blue team. So I would say spend your first 90 days or even your first 30 days learning about upper management and learning what their specific goals are. This could be in conversation with them, in conversation with the people who work under them, but put together those ideas and figure out which of those you can help assist, because that is really your role in one way or another. Eventually you will get down to the operational side, but if you keep those goals in mind, you'll be doing the best you can for the business.
And you spoke about continuous learning, always needing to keep up to date. What resources are you leaning on these days that you would like to recommend?
So my number one cybersecurity resource is Discord. There are so many Discord servers that are literally packed full of the world's most talented cybersecurity practitioners, and they just sit there and talk all day. It's awesome. Like you can hop in there and just see what they're talking about. You can hop in voice chats and see people hacking boxes and stuff. And it's Discord. If you don't have a Discord, go and make one, and then Google around until you find well, I'll link my Discord below if there's an opportunity for me to do so. And I have links to other cybersecurity Discords in there. So maybe hop in there.
Yeah, definitely. We can actually add that to the show notes. So before we wrap up today's conversation, do you have anything to add? Anything you think we missed?
On the topic of resources, there's also a group called SecKC. If you're local to the Kansas City area, I've got to give them a shout out because they're like my local people. So check out SecKC if you're in the Kansas City area. Find a mentor or many mentors. That is how you will succeed in cybersecurity. The only reason I'm so passionate about this stuff is because that passion was shared with me. So find someone who's going to share that passion with you, and then share it with somebody else down the line. And I've also got Twitter here. So InfoSec Twitter is big and expansive, and, check it out. It's not as bad as the rest of Twitter, I promise.
Thank you so much, Matticus. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and your journey into cyber. If anyone listening has any follow-up questions or would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so my Twitter is @SecurityPlease, Security PLZ. Feel free to give me a follow or, interact with whatever I'm posting over there. I've got a LinkedIn link that I'll leave with you too. Look me up on LinkedIn, Matticus Hunt, and I'm leaving a Discord link with Brendan. If you want to hop in there, I have resources for other Discords. So yeah, that's where you can find me. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with me there if you have any questions. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. So thank you so much again for joining us today on Cybersecurity Heroes, and to the rest of you, we'll see you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Cybersecurity Heroes. Practical and experiential knowledge on a day in the life of security heroes. Catch our next episode by subscribing or following through your favorite podcast platform. If you're listening on Apple Podcast, please leave a rating for the show. They really help a lot. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.